The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
Don't miss out on the last few weeks of football action with Prize Picks, the best place to win cash while watching the playoffs. The app is simple. Pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Download the Prize Picks Daily Fantasy Sports app today and use code FIELD and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code FIELD on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks. Run your game. Must be present in certain states. Visit prizepicks.com for restrictions and details.
Amateur Traveler, episode 911. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about red rocks and big steaks, blue bonnets and wineries, Buddy Holly, Cadillac Ranch, and Route 66 as we go to Lubbock and Amarillo in Texas. This is Chris Christensen from Amateur Traveler. Let's talk about Texas. I'd like to welcome to the show Jill Robbins, travel writer and also a blogger at rippedjeansandbifocals.com. And Jill has come to talk to us about 2 cities in Texas, Lubbock and Amarillo. Jill, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chris. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
And what is your connection with Texas, first of all?
I grew up here. I was not born here, but my father moved us down here when I was about 2, and I lived here until I was about 24, and then moved back again in 2014. So pretty much a lifelong Texan. I live just outside of San Antonio, Texas, in the South Central area. I think it's hard to call yourself a Texas travel expert because it's such a big area of land, but
Right.
I think I'm pretty close, and I have a good read of what there is to do and see in the state, and especially like telling people about the smaller, lesser known places.
Excellent. And why should someone go to Texas and specifically to Amarillo and Lubbock?
Amarillo and Lubbock are both smaller cities. I don't like the word off the beaten path or hidden gem. And if you think of another way to say that, let me know. And we could probably both make a lot of money. But these are just great little slices of Texas. And they both really showcase the unique landscape of Texas. Lubbock is in the High Plains area. Amarillo is in the Panhandle. They're both known for different things, but both have some surprises and things you might not expect to see in a small town. They both have a lot of things to do. Amarillo is more focused on outdoor adventure, and the Americana, that is the old Route 66. There's still a lot of that there. Really unique and fun and quirky and strange roadside attractions in the Amarillo area. Lubbock is known for music history, and particularly being the birthplace of Buddy Holly. So that is what puts that on the map. But both of these are driving trips. You'd have to either fly into the destinations and drive between them, or start somewhere else in the state and do a larger Texas road trip. But both are fun cities to see. Parts of Texas the movies might not show you. It's not the big city, oil town of Dallas. It's not Houston. It's not Austin with the heavy music scene. It's just a cool little small town slice and small town people with fun stuff to see. And also, both of them, especially Lubbock, are pretty low cost destinations with some free things to do. So if you're looking to plan a trip that's not expensive. They're both fairly easy on the wallet.
Excellent. When you say small town, this is the Texas definition of small town, which means the combined population is probably 500,000. That's also the population of the state of Wyoming. So depending on where you're from, they're big cities or small towns. So
Yes, I just looked up the Lubbock population numbers really quick, and it's 263,000. I would
right.
say Amarillo is probably about on par for that. So small cities, definitely. I live in the seventh largest city of the world, so it's a spread out urban area. So Lubbock is definitely a smaller town, but yeah, it's all relative, just depending on what you compare it with.
Excellent. What kind of itinerary are you going to recommend for us?
I would recommend either flying into Lubbock and then spending 3 days there and driving to Amarillo, or doing it the other way, flying into Amarillo and then driving to Lubbock. And then I have a cool side trip that I can recommend for both.
Did you have a preference which city we started talking about in more detail?
I think we'll start with Lubbock. Amarillo is probably one of my favorite places on the planet, so it's the best for last thing. And I would say spend the majority of your time in Amarillo, just depending on what your interests are. Amarillo is
Okay.
more outdoor focused, and Lubbock is more things to do in the city. But I have a list of things you should definitely not miss in Lubbock. Lubbock is a collection of smaller, shorter activities. So
Okay.
it's easy to move them around based on what your schedule is, what the weather's doing, the time of day, the way the wind is blowing. So none of these activities outside from the wine tourism and the wine tasting are things that are going to take like a huge chunk of time. So you can move them around and build how you'd like to do stuff.
What are you going to recommend we do first?
The first thing that I think you should do in Lubbock is to explore the Buddy Holly history and to go to the Buddy Holly Center. It is a small museum that I would say it's a don't miss. Even if you're younger maybe and don't know who Buddy Holly is, I would definitely go. You can take about an hour to 2 hours to go through, just depending on how much stuff you want to read. It's a museum that is heavy on written exhibits and less heavy on the artifacts to look at. But if you read everything, probably 2 hours. If you're not, if you're just looking at stuff, maybe an hour. There is a really great movie at the beginning that should not be missed, especially if you're less familiar with his life and career. It's got a clip of a very young Mick Jagger talking about what Buddy Holly's music meant to him and how it influenced the Rolling Stones. It's just a cool big picture thing. I grew up being aware of who Buddy Holly was the day the music died and the 1970s song. But the last time I was up there, I talked to the director and said the interest was waning a little bit as the millennials were one of their bigger travel markets and maybe just don't have as big of an awareness of who he was and what contribution that he made. I thought it was a really cool thing to go and see. It doesn't take a lot of time. There's good photo ops outside. There's a giant pair of Buddy Holly glasses that you can stand in and get your picture taken. People like to do that. There's a plaza across from the property with a larger than life Buddy Holly statue. He's probably about 8 feet tall with his guitar. So a really big statue. Fun Instagram opportunity. There's also a free gallery that's attached to the Buddy Holly Center. It doesn't really have anything to do with Buddy Holly. It's just an art gallery that's there that you don't have to pay to go into. And then there's another house that is part of the museum that is not open all the time. It's open, I think, only on the weekends. And it's the house where his drummer grew up, where a lot of their songs were written. So that's the significance of that.
And if you're not familiar with Buddy Holly, I would suggest you find on streaming the Buddy Holly story from, I think it's 1978, with a young Gary Busey.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And you'll get both a dose of his music as well as some of the history, and obviously the history of his tragic death, and that was, as you said, memorialized in the song "The Day the Music Died." So
I would definitely go. There's also the Buddy Holly Hall in Lubbock, which is not to be confused with the Buddy Holly Center. The Buddy Holly Hall is a performing arts center. If you're into architecture, it's a fun place to go and look at. There's a lot of hidden guitar picks and not so hidden guitar picks in the architecture, in the seats, and in the little details. But look at the calendar before you go to see if anything on their events page is piquing your interest. But they do often have Buddy Holly cover bands or Buddy Holly themed entertainment there, in addition to other things that they have there, just regular concerts or Broadway
Got it.
style shows, things like that. So that's also a fun Buddy Holly thing to check out. There's other museums in Lubbock. There is one called Silent Wings, which is a glider, non-motorized aircraft museum that's over by the airport. I have not been in there. My husband went there the last time we were in Lubbock, and I went and did something else. He's an airplane guy, and took him about an hour to go through. There is a reciprocal agreement between the Silent Wings and the Buddy Holly Center where you can get a discount on the other ticket if you go to one. So that's a way to save a little bit of change on doing things.
Okay.
And there's also something I didn't think I would be too interested in, ended up really liking. It was the National Ranching Heritage Center, which is an indoor-outdoor gallery, museum, and historical park dedicated to the history of ranching. And I liked it a lot better than I thought I would. There's 3 indoor galleries that have photos and sculptures and artwork that just tell the history of ranching in the Texas Plains area. That was a big point of travel for westward expansion and still a big cattle ranching industry, and tells the story of the people who settled Lubbock. But the outdoor historical park is what is really cool. Yeah, there's about 40 buildings that have been transported from various places around Lubbock to make a little village. You can wander through a pathway to look at the buildings from the outside. Some of them you can go in. It includes everything from the very most rudimentary little farmer's cottage to the big fancy landowner's house. There's a mill, there's a commissary, the mess hall, the ranch hands barracks. And for anyone who is a fan of the Yellowstone TV series, the Taylor Sheridan franchise that we're eagerly waiting for to come back on, there's going to be a spin-off show called Four Sixes, which is actually a ranch in Texas that's going to be featured in the show. And they've got a couple of the buildings that were part of the Four Sixes ranch on display there. So that's a cool television tie-in for anyone who's interested in those shows. I thought it was cool.
Interesting. Okay.
But inside, there's also some exhibits related to the oil boom in that area and what happened when they first hit oil, when they were drilling for water or trying to make wells back when people were initially settling Lubbock. I would say that, and this is also a free activity. There's no charge to go in and do that. I spent 2 hours total inside and out, and could have probably spent another one. It's anybody that's interested in history will probably find that interesting. And just the outdoor open air aspect, it's just a nice place to get outside and wander around. It's also accessible. Everything is paved, so it's easy to walk around out there. But I like the free aspect. It was just a neat way to get to know Lubbock that I was probably so tickled that I liked it because I didn't expect to like it.
All right.
You could probably dedicate a full day to Lubbock's art scene, which I also found very surprising. That was an art hub on the Texas High Plains. So I don't think I mentioned it, but Lubbock is also a college town. It's home to Texas Tech University, which is a fairly large, sprawling campus. Football fans or Kansas City Chiefs fans might recognize it as where Patrick Mahomes went to school. Still really a Lubbock favorite son, a big deal there. But Texas Tech has an open campus, and they have an outdoor art program that's got about 150 pieces of public art that anybody can go and look at. All kinds of really larger than life creative sculptures that you can go on campus and look at. There are a few of them that are inside the building, but which is harder to access for just the average person coming on campus. But probably 90% of them are outside. And the website is ttupublicart.com, and it gives a little thumbnail listing of all the pieces and maybe what they mean, as well as a downloadable map that you can get the lay of the land and see where these sculptures are located on campus. It's a really good way to get your steps in. It's a nice, pretty walkable campus. But if you don't want to walk, you can take an art cart tour, which is a golf cart with siding built onto it, so you're somewhat protected from the elements, and that's free. They like donations, but you'll have a docent or somebody from the art department take you around and show you the sculptures. That can take up a couple hours if you're going to go to all sculptures. So
if you did the tour.
do the tour, sit and look at them longer and do it on your own and delve into the meaning of the sculpture, probably a little bit longer. But it's a nice campus with really pretty architectural details. And I will mention that since it's a college town, when you visit is really going to...
It's going to be my next question. When you were
Yes.
talking about protecting from the elements, when do
Yes.
you recommend visiting?
I recommend doing this trip with the 2-day itinerary in the early summertime. When we start digging into what's in Amarillo more, that really drives the early summertime as being the desired time frame to go up there, because there's a summer event in Palo Duro Canyon State Park that is a summertime event, and I think it's an absolute don't miss thing to do and worth planning your trip around. And also the weather. The weather in this part of Texas, and probably most of Texas, is best in the spring and the fall. It's warm. You can be outside and do things. Right now in San Antonio, it was 107 degrees yesterday. It was absolutely miserable. Not really safe to be out walking around looking at art, and most people probably would find that unpleasant. So I would recommend early summer. Lubbock is a little bit quieter because most of the students have gone home, but it's a good time to go and do that art tour because you're not having to swim against the current and fight all the campus traffic and the campus shuttles. So I think that's probably the best time to go.
And you say right now, when we're recording this in late August.
Yes. I would say probably mid-June would be the latest I would want to go for a nice temperate experience. I would say avoid going to Texas at all in July and August.
I've been in July and August for a conference because they schedule the conferences then because it's cheap because people don't want to go there that time.
Yes. I live in a big convention city, so there's always people here. But I would live in Montana during July and August if I could afford to. It's not the nicest time to come, but yes, you can get some good travel deals for sure.
Ah, bon chien. Bonjour, je suis Theo, a tour leader with Explore, and this is Punti. He's helping us find truffles under the trees next to this beautiful vineyard. Maybe for tomorrow's cooking class? Oui, col is semi-heure. Parfait. 7:00. Not everyone gets to enjoy a Bordeaux sunset this way, but you will if you explore. No, Punti. Search exploreworldwide.com and don't just travel, explore.
Head to Whole Foods Market to jumpstart your January during our New Year boosting event with savings on feel-good favorites store-wide. Save on organic picks, wellness staples, and more all month long.
But Lubbock also has a mini artist colony downtown in the area. Their arts district is where the Performing Arts Center is, the Buddy Holly Hall that I mentioned earlier. And if you can get there on the first Friday of the month, if you're an art lover, if you're going to Lubbock for the art, I would definitely work to plan it so you're there on a first Friday. They have an art walk that the art district and then the businesses around the art district really get involved in. There are 2 full-fledged galleries that you can go down there, go to in Lubbock anytime. Both are free. You can go and look at the art, sometimes purchase art. There's the Charles Adams Gallery, which is a smaller gallery featuring local Lubbock and Texas artists. There's all kinds of stuff in there. It's going to be different at any given time, but there's a lot of Texas bluebonnet art and a lot of different interpretations of Buddy Holly. Those seem to be.
You say Texas bluebonnet art. So Texas bluebonnet, the state flower, as I recall.
Yes, our state flower.
So art that features Texas bluebonnets, or is there a particular style of art called Texas bluebonnet art that I don't know? Okay.
No, it's art that features Texas bluebonnets. We have a really limited bloom season, and that is in usually March or April. But we're very proud of our bluebonnets, and it really shows up in our artwork and in Lubbock. Buddy Holly is a big theme, and it's interesting to see how different artists portray Buddy Holly.
Excellent. Where to next?
There's also, it's called LUCA. It's the Louise Underwood Hopkins Center for the Arts. It's a big performing arts center. They have 2 or 3 galleries you can go in and look at art. I would also suggest maybe looking at their calendar before you go. They have different classes where you can learn to make a project or take ballroom dancing or see a play. And most of their programs are either free or for a very small fee, a nominal charge for like craft supplies or something like that. But the first Friday art walk is everybody's out in full force. It's in the evening. It's 6 to 9 all year round, and it's food trucks and music and entertainment. It's like a mini street fair every
Okay.
month. And even some of the non-art centered businesses that sort of surround that art district they'll have an artist display or some type of performance art to go along with that. So it's a big community builder, which really surprised me to find that in Lubbock for sure.
Got it.
And then wine. This is not the biggest place in Texas for wine tourism, but the High Plains area is one of the biggest AVAs, American viticultural areas, one of the biggest places where grapes are grown in Texas. And a lot of the grapes that are in other Texas wines from more densely populated wine regions actually do come from Lubbock. So you can easily do a full day of winery touring in Lubbock. There are 6 established wineries and vineyards there right now. You could stretch it out over 2, just depending on how you like to drink wine. Someone once told me that 3, max 4 wineries in a day was the ideal if
Right.
you're going to do all the tasting and
Or
not
somebody else better be driving.
and not use the bucket after that, because it's just day drinking, right? It's not wine tasting. So you can do 3 on one day and 3 on another day. And you mentioned somebody else driving. The disadvantage to doing wine tasting or a dedicated wine day is that there's no established wine shuttles in the area.
Okay.
So you're going to have to work that out amongst your travel companions and see who's going to be the driver if everybody wants to do wine. They do have Uber and Lyft in Lubbock. I have not used a rideshare there, and it may be less available during the summertime when most of the college students aren't there, but I have not tested that or tried to take a rideshare. There are always options for private hires if you want to dig into that so that everyone can partake. But 3 wineries in a day, I think that's a lot of wine.
3 is too much for me. 2
Yeah.
is usually where I would stop, but that's a personal thing.
It is. I think just me, I stop losing the nuances of what I'm tasting after 2 or 3, definitely. But there are 6 in the area. The most notable or well-known are Delano Estacado, which is one of the oldest grape growing production outlets in Texas, and then McPherson, who's another known name in the wine world. And the McPherson Cellars Tasting Room is in downtown Lubbock. It's a nice new tasting room with a patio, a really cool place to go and gather and sit and enjoy your company and some good wine. And then Delano Estacado is a little bit out of town, maybe a 5-10 minute drive from downtown. Really gorgeous new open air tasting room with a patio and just a fun place to go. Both of them have a lot of wines, a lot of different types of wines. No matter where your tastes run, there is just a ton at both of those. I also really like one that is more of an estate winery outside of town, maybe 15 minutes. Nothing is too far outside of town, but you need a car. Is Pheasant Ridge, and it's more rustic. You're more like out near the vineyards, and they don't have as large of a selection as the other 2 that I mentioned do. But they have some really lovely reds, and it's just a fun sort of more pastoral kind of experience to go out there. But their hours are more limited. So I would definitely look at their website and make sure that they are out there. I think they're primarily on weekends, whereas Llano, Estacado, and McPherson are open pretty much always whenever you want to go.
Okay.
And I am not a beer person as much, but Lubbock does have 4 or 5 craft breweries, tap rooms that I know of. So you can add that to your list of beer, wine, spirits, centered tourism if that's something.
And do you travel with a beer drinker who would recommend one of those over the others?
I do not usually travel with a beer drinker.
All the beer recommendations on my blog are my wife's doing.
Oh,
Because
cool.
she drinks beer and I don't.
Yeah, I'm really picky when it comes to beers. I basically only like IPAs, and not an IPA that tastes like a blueberry or a kiwi or anything except hops and water. The one beer that I had at the LBK brewery, which is LBK is the airport code. I'm not sure what the connection is between the LBK brewery. I stopped in there for a quick drink with a girlfriend, and it was a sour beer that I had, that's a definite curated taste or acquired taste of sour. But there are those types of things happening in Lubbock. They have emerging food and beverage scene, which is cool to see in a small town like that.
And you say a food scene as well. Are there any
Yes.
particular restaurants you would recommend?
Yes, I have four that I think are really worth mentioning. I've got two that are bougie and upscale, and for what I would consider a more elevated palate or a serious foodie, and two that are more in line with what people might associate or expect of Texas food. The first one is the West Table, which is in a historic building downtown. Really cool architecture. There's the really high ceilings with the really elaborate molding and the original tiles on the floor. Just a really pretty place to go and eat. They are only open for dinner, and they call it New American Cuisine. I would say it's probably medium for me on the scale of adventurous or not adventurous.
Okay.
There are a couple of meat and potato type things, like a roast chicken with potatoes on the menu. There's a lot of oysters, a lot of raw bar stuff, a lot of really elevated sauces. I had a shrimp risotto, and my friend had a beet and goat cheese salad, and we split those. But they change their menu seasonally or daily, and both that one and the other one I'm going to talk about in a second brought their menus out on just a piece of printed paper and said, this is what we have today. But it was a smaller menu. The appetizer we had was like a crab hush puppy. But if you're a more choosy eater, I might really look at the menu and ask some questions before I went there. And the other one, this is more of a fine dining experience. It's called the Nicolette. It is absolutely a gorgeous space. It's a converted home of an architect. So there's a lot of really just interesting little style details in the atmosphere. It's a really beautiful place to go and look at. The chef is, I think last year he was one of the Texas James Beard finalists, and it's more of an elevated dining experience. They have a regular menu, and they also do the chef's tasting menu where you can have, I think it's 6 or 7 smaller tasting portions, so they can showcase what they make. I would say that's for someone who is used to more elevated foods and trying new things with what they're eating. I'm a pretty adventurous eater. I wouldn't say I'm a hardcore foodie, but the menu, I will say, was hard for me to understand. And I had to ask questions. What is this? So that's couscous with squash on top. They use really creative terms in describing what's on the menu. And they do that intentionally, but the servers were really explained it in a way that I don't think would make anybody uncomfortable or feel silly. It wasn't like a snobby, highbrow experience. But if you are a hamburger patty, meat and potatoes kind of person, I would probably not go there. I'm sure they would probably be accommodating. And there were some pastas on the menu, but everything is, it's the artful presentation, just beautifully plated stuff. I thought it was really fun to find something like that in Lubbock, and I enjoyed my experience there. It just all depends on what you like. But as far as other places to eat, and the Nicolette is dinner only also. For other places that may be more approachable are the Cast Iron Grill, which serves breakfast and lunch. It's very country cooking. And they do breakfast and lunch. They'll have the biscuits and gravy and the chicken fried steak and the smothered chopped steak with mushrooms and onions and things like that. They have a lot of Mexican and Southwest influence on their menu. There's a lot of stuff with green chilies if you can handle a little bit of spice. I think that's really good. But what the cast iron skillet is on the map for is pie. They make every kind of pie you could probably imagine, and they sell out of their pies every day. I went for breakfast and I was eating my burritos, and the people at the tables around me were all having pie. So pie for breakfast, but it was good
Works
pie.
for me.
So that's the place you go for pie in Lubbock. And then the other one I would recommend checking out is Evie Mae's Barbecue, because it's Texas. You got to eat barbecue. I think all barbecue is good barbecue. I think it's like pizza, and that causes arguments with certain people in the state. But this is a good barbecue place. But what's interesting about it is that everything is gluten-free. It was started by someone with celiac disease who was afraid to go out to restaurants because of restrictions and started playing around with recipes, and eventually got a food truck and then a brick and mortar store. I am not gluten-free, and I did not realize it was gluten-free. until I was halfway through eating. You would never know. You would never know, Chris, the sides and the desserts. And the barbecue is really good too. And then they have the smokehouse on site. So I would definitely recommend checking that out. It's a college town. There's little coffee shops and restaurants and bars all dotted throughout downtown. I will say some of the bars, if you want to look at nightlife in Lubbock, summer is probably not the time to do it. It wasn't something I really honed in on those opportunities. I am not a night owl, but the downtown area seemed pretty sleepy in the summer. And,
sure, without the students there.
I think some of the restaurants and the coffee shops down there had more summer hours.
Is there anything else you wanted to talk about in Lubbock?
I think we're good. Yes, I think we're good.
Okay,
Amarillo. It's less than a 2-hour drive, just depending on traffic and weather stuff. You're not going to go through any kind of congested major highway systems to get from one place to another. But I'll start by talking about the things to do in Amarillo. I love this part of Texas. It was my COVID sanctuary, the place that I went when everything else was closing. But Amarillo is famous for Palo Duro Canyon, which is the second largest naturally occurring canyon in the United States, behind the Grand Canyon. So it's this big canyon up there in the panhandle, and half of it is managed by Texas Parks and Wildlife. So it's Palo Duro Canyon State Park, and the other half of the canyon is private land. And it is just spectacular. It's got the red rock formations. I think one of the reasons it's so cool is because it's so surprising. You're up there. It's not the most scenic part of Texas. You're driving through flat land. And the first time I took my husband up there, who is not from Texas, he actually asked me, "Are you sure that we're in the right place? Are you sure there's a canyon up here?" I was like, yes, I'm sure. And then you see it and it's an incredible sight. I think it's probably the most beautiful place in Texas. But the state park is a really well done state park. You can camp there. You can hike there. Hiking is probably the top activity, with the Lighthouse Trail being the most popular trail, or the most iconic thing that the park is known for. If you look up a picture of Palo Duro Canyon, or if you look it up on the internet, you're going to see this tall kudu tower, which is the lighthouse. And it's a 6-mile trail out and back. Aside from it being a longish hike, it is an easy hike. The path is pretty easy, and there's not a ton of elevation gain. And there's, I think, 30 miles of trail system in the park. So you can pick other things that are shorter or more challenging. There's also a CCC trail, Civilian Conservation Corps, who did a lot of work with the parks during the 30s. So there's some of those structures. And then there's this offshoot of that trail called the Goodnight Trail, which is a little bit dicey. It's a beautiful vista, but it's a very steep, narrow walkout with some steep drop-offs. So maybe that's why they call it the Goodnight Trail. But if you're up for that, beautiful views. There's also equestrian trails and mountain bike trails that are pretty popular. And there's outfitters in the park or in the area where you can rent a bike and bike equipment if you don't bring your own. And there's guided horseback tours that advertise for all levels. If I was a new horseback rider, and I don't really ride, but if I were new to the sport or not comfortable, that is probably not where I'd opt to start. Some of their horse trails might have those drop-offs. If you're nervous, it just might not be the best place to take up horseback riding. But if you can walk around, if you're fully mobile and able-bodied, the hiking is really good. And then if you just want to do a scenic drive through the park, it's also really pretty to see from the windshield.
Hey, Atlanta, Apple is open for small business. That's right. We're here to make starting and running your business simpler. With privacy and security built in on all devices, it's easy for you to protect your customers' data. And if you need hardware or software support, you'll get advice from business experts at no cost whatsoever. So you can focus more on the soup du jour and less on, the other stuff. At Apple, we're open for your small business. Go to apple.com/small business or visit an Apple store to learn more.
Kroger Delivery has one mission: to deliver the freshest food right to your door. That's why our drivers are pros. Our trucks are refrigerated. And when it comes to low prices, we always deliver. With $20 off your first order of $75 or more, there's no better time to get in on the action. Mission accomplished. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
And then I want to mention Texas the musical, and this is
I
why
was seeing
have you
me
heard
by
of this?
surprise. No, just
Yeah, it's fairly well known,
okay,
especially up there. I think it starts usually late May, early June, like when school
okay,
starts getting out, and runs through the summer. The tickets usually go on sale, or they'll announce the dates in December, January. So I would watch for those. The tickets aren't hard to get. They perform it, I think, 6 nights a week during their summer season. But it's a reason a lot of people go up there, or they'll place it high on their priority list. And if you decide last minute, I want to go to this show on Wednesday night, you might be out of luck. So I would definitely plan around going back.
when I was seeing this year in 2024, their season was June 6th through August 3rd. So it's really June and July
Okay.
mostly.
And that kind of corresponds with the nicer part of the year to go up there.
Mhm.
It is farther north in Texas, so it is a little bit cooler than the southern part of the state where I live, and even cooler than Lubbock. Still, early June would be good. In July, you're going to be hot, but it's also outdoors. But it's an
Right.
outdoor amphitheater in the park. There's fireworks, there's horses. It's a really cool show. I recommend that everybody go check it out at least once. But
I see they're also doing Shakespeare.
yes, I don't know if that is new. When I was
No idea.
the last time I looked that up, I saw that. So that would be interesting to see. And I'm curious to see how good of a response that gets, and if that's maybe just an option for people to go do something that maybe can't get tickets to the Texas musical. But
Right.
definitely look at that. And the acoustics are just gorgeous. It's any kind of musical show. It's just incredible out there. But I want to talk really quick about the other side of the canyon, because I think that's the thing that the guidebooks and the travel blogs, except mine, are not going to tell you to go and do, is Palo Duro Creek Ranch. I don't know how I've heard of this place because it does not show up on the list. It's called Palo Duro Creek Ranch. Some of the local folks will call it the Elkins Ranch. And I think my Airbnb host told me about it. I think that's how I know about it from way back when. It's a cattle ranch. It's the privately owned part of the canyon. It's the same canyon. It's the same landscape, but it's private and it's not as crowded. You can see more wildlife, less people. They offer Jeep tours that go
okay.
down to the canyon floor, and it is absolutely my favorite travel memory that I have with my family is going out there in the afternoon in like April and just riding in the Jeep down to the canyon floor and seeing coyotes out during the day. It was very cool.
Very cool.
Yes, I would definitely make time to do that. Just depending on whether you're a camper, a hiker, a biker, I would say definitely at least 2 days in the canyon or doing canyon things. Probably just going to vary just based on what you like to do and what your timeline is. But I would definitely pick at least 2 days to do things there. And then in Amarillo proper, you've got the area, the Route 66 historical district, one time famous iconic highway that connected the Midwest to the California coast. The Route 66 historical district has a little bit of everything. They have shops and kind of kitschy things. There is the Devil's Wire Museum, or the Devil's something.
Oh,
What is it
barbed
called?
wire. Okay.
Yes, it's a barbed wire museum, but it's Devil's Rope, I think. Devil's Rope Museum. It's a museum dedicated to barbed wire. Just so kitschy things like that. Amarillo and the area around it. Also very heavy on quirky roadside attractions. The big, large leaning cowboy. The Leaning Tower of Texas, which is a leaning water tower in a field. Just there's a pair of painted legs. You could literally spend at least an entire day driving around the area, taking pictures of these really quirky, offbeat roadside attractions. There's definitely a market for people who like to do that. The one I thought was really cool is called the Floating Mesa, and it's a piece of plywood. It's an art installation. It's affixed near the top of a mesa and painted like a bluish white. So when the sky is clear, it blends in with the background and it makes it look like the top of the mesa is floating in the air. It's just a weird optical illusion. And then there's the Cadillac Ranch. Have you heard of the Cadillac Ranch?
I have heard of the Cadillac Ranch.
Yes, the Cadillac Ranch is 10 vintage Cadillacs, the big ones with the really long fins. Their noses are buried in the dirt, spins up. It's like a car hinge. They're in a little loose semicircle, and you go and you paint the cars. It's in a field outside of town. They have moved it. They've moved a couple of these roadside attractions around, or a couple of them have fizzled because the highway has moved, or they've rerouted things as the city has grown. And the Route 66 has changed and the big highways have taken over. But they moved it in the 90s at some time. But you go and you take your spray paint and you do whatever you want to do with these cars, and then you take your picture and go. It's probably an overrated roadside attraction, but I don't know. It's something that's kind of fun and quirky to do.
And it doesn't have the same astrological alignment that Carhenge in Nebraska does, just to be fair.
No,
So
no, it's just a
my understanding is from a current candidate for VP that the Carhenge was so popular in Nebraska that they made a version of it with stone in England.
Okay, yes. I have not been to Carhenge, but yeah, it's painted cars in a field, and it consistently shows up as your number one tourist attraction in the Amarillo area. Take that for what it's worth. I think it's fun. The only thing I would say to people who are going to go do that is, if you're road tripping, bring your paint with you, or buy it at the Home Depot or the Lowe's in town. There's a little kiosk / gift shop, sort of catty corner from the field, that charges an astronomical amount for a can of spray paint.
Sure.
So bring your own spray paint and take a picture, and don't expect your creation to be there 5 minutes after you leave. And I would also try to get the car on either end for the best pictures, because you can have it's just a different view with all the cars laid out behind you.
And we should say, if your road trip here to Amarillo eventually ends up at Southern California and you go to California Adventure and you do the Cars ride, take a look at the mountains in the background of the Cars ride, which are the Cadillac Range. And they are an homage to Cadillac Ranch.
I did not know that. We are going to Disneyland for spring break. Actually, I have been a long time ago. My kids have not been. So I'm excited to check that out. So that's very cool. I'm glad I know that now. Yeah, it's been a while.
They paint them, though.
I will remember that. I will try not to get kicked out of Disneyland. But you can spray paint at the Cadillac Ranch. Just clean up your spray paint bottles. That was one thing that made me sad, is this mountain of empty paint cans just sitting there in a pile, and people not being good visitors and cleaning up their paint cans. Clean your paint cans up. The other big thing that people do in Amarillo is attempt to eat a 70-ounce steak. It's one of those man versus food type things. It's called Big Texas Steakhouse. I think it's Big Texas Steakhouse and Brewery. But they have a 72-ounce steak with lots of rules for eating it. You have to sit at a certain table and not have anybody with you, so that they don't doubt the integrity that you're eating all of it. But if you eat it all, then you don't pay for it. That's one of those. I have not attempted it, and no one in my family has tried that yet. But I have 2 teenage boys, so that could be in the cards in the future. We'll see.
Where to next?
I want to talk really quickly about a side trip to take from either location, but just to recap Amarillo, you can spend 4 days combined with doing park stuff and Route 66 stuff and quirky roadside attractions. There's a lot of things to do in that area that can take up that time. Side trip from either place that I recommend is Caprock Canyons State Park and Trailway. It's less than a 2-hour drive from Lubbock and Amarillo. It's another canyon operated by Texas Parks and Wildlife. The same sort of red rocks as you'll see in Palo Duro. Not as spectacular, not as majestic. It's a camping, mountain biking, hiking location. But what's cool about even just doing a drive-through for the day is the state bison herd lives at Caprock Canyon. So you do have to be mindful of them when you're camping and hiking. But it's lots and lots of bison out there. So it's cool to see.
If you have not had a chance to see a bison herd, if you haven't been up to Montana or the Dakotas or Wyoming or someplace, it's definitely something worth seeing.
We happened on that just by accident. We were staying up in Palo Duro and didn't want to go home, but we couldn't stay in our Airbnb, so we just looked at stuff near me and decided to just take a day tour of Caprock Canyon and stop somewhere else along the way and just spent the day out there. So we went out there completely blind and not knowing what was there. It's, oh, bison. It's not those huge majestic herds that you see in Yellowstone, but it was still a cool thing to see in Texas. And if you're out in that sort of less traveled area, it's definitely worth tacking that one on. It's a cool spot.
Excellent. I don't know if you've had a chance yet, but there's an interesting site near Amarillo that caught my eye, which was and I don't know how to say it, Abalates Flint Quarries.
I don't know that.
This is where 13,000 years ago, hunters were making flint stone tools. It's out in the middle of nowhere, but it's a flint deposit and then a small museum there dedicated to this prehistoric time and the flint nappers who were in the region.
No, I am in the early stages of planning a trip up to Amarillo, like Lubbock. They've got this emerging food scene that I don't really know a lot about. That's more of an elevated food scene than that. It's not the 72-ounce steak and barbecue. There's things to see, so I am looking forward to checking that out. I don't usually frequent restaurants. When I go up there, I usually stay in an Airbnb or stay in the parks. The food experience has not yet really been part of my Amarillo experience. So I'm looking forward to seeing what else they have up there. But
excellent.
It's truly one of my favorite places in Texas, and I think everybody should go there.
Anything else you would recommend we see while we're in Amarillo before we get to our wrap-up questions?
I don't think so. I could talk individually about the different roadside attractions, but the Cadillac Ranch and the big cowboy statue are probably the most standout. But it's really the gift that keeps on giving, that area. And there's such a market for them. Just weird art installations pop up from time to time. So it's a fun way to spend the day driving around when the weather's nice. Good scenery.
Got it. It looks like the big cowboy statue is at the big Texan cowboy, and this was something like Wall Drug, where they were looking for attracting people to come to the restaurant and the 72-ounce steak.
Yeah, and they've moved him around and refurbished him a couple of different times, just as the driving routes change and just the pattern of where people are going has changed. They've moved him at least once to where he can be seen and loved by more people. He was looking pretty sad there about maybe 1996 in my head is 5 years ago, but somewhere around that time that they refurbished him because his fingers were crumbling and he was looking pretty sad. But I think he looks okay now. I haven't been up in that Route 66 Main Street area of Amarillo since probably the end of 2022. I think that's the last time I saw him.
Got it. Excellent. As we get to some of our wrap-up questions, I think you may have answered this already, but you're standing in the prettiest spot in this corner of Texas. Where are you standing and what are you looking at?
I am looking out over the vista that is directly where the lighthouse ends. The lighthouse trail culminates with this big, larger-than-life, majestic hoodoo, and the view just in sort of the horseshoe around it is the best thing to look at.
So we're in Palo Duro
Canyon State Park. Yes, and I think that's the prettiest part. I really like the private side of the canyon just because of the more serene vibe, but I think the prettiest rock formations are probably on the state park side.
Okay. Which is probably why that's the state park side. One thing that makes you laugh and say only in this corner of Texas.
Probably the painted legs.
The painted
legs. There's a statue of painted legs up there in the Amarillo area that they look like that movie, the Christmas Story, the Fragile legs. They're just like mannequin legs. Cadillacs buried in the dirt is rather unique. What was I thinking? Only in Texas. There was something. Oh, Prairie Dog Town in Lubbock, only in Texas. Although I think there are other prairie dog towns. I was going to mention that, and I got sidetracked on something else. There's a public park in Lubbock where people feed prairie dogs all kinds of junk food like Doritos and candy bars.
Okay, that can't be recommended. But
so the first time I took my kids there, they were like 8, maybe. They're in high school now. And I grew up going to parks and respecting the outdoors and had the don't feed wildlife ingrained in my kids. And we show up there to see the prairie dogs and people are feeding them Doritos. It doesn't say not to, but only in Texas. Maybe you feed a prairie dog
funny.
Doritos. I don't know. It's a quirky state for sure, but it's a great area.
And if you had to summarize the region in just 3 words, what 3 words are you going to pick?
Majestic.
Okay.
Open.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this is really dramatic, but like awe-inspiring. I love the canyon. It's a gorgeous place, but it's out there. It's away from the city. It's very peaceful.
Excellent. Our guest again has been Jill Robbins. Jill, if we wanted to send people to the best example of your writing, either on your blog or elsewhere, of this region, where are we going to send people?
Probably to the blog and jillrobbinswrites.com. I have a selection of my travel writing on there as well.
Okay. Is there a particular article we're going to send them to?
I have a couple of articles up on visitamarillo.com.
If you want to send me those links, we can put them
Yes, I can definitely do that. I can give you some Texas Center content. And I also have an article on my blog about the Elkins Ranch.
I already have a link to that.
Oh, okay, very good. I know it's still current because I looked at the information last year, but I probably need to give that one a dust off too, which I will do before your show publishes.
Excellent. Jill, thanks so much for coming on Amateur Traveler, sharing with us your obvious love for Texas and for the region of Amarillo and Lubbock.
Yes, you should come.
Build a routine with Ollie that supports your wellness needs, like getting your daily vitamins and minerals with Ollie's multi-gummies, or keeping your mood upbeat with all the vitamin D in Hello Happy. Give your gut health some support with probiotics, and wake up feeling refreshed after taking Ollie Sleep. Do wellness on your terms. Find Ollie at a Walmart or Target near you or at ollie.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Thanks again to both the sponsors and the patrons of the show who help support Amateur Traveler financially. This is my day job now. And if you're interested in learning more about how you can become a patron of the show, go to patreon.com/amateurtraveler. If you want to become a sponsor of the show, send me an email to host@amateurtraveler.com or chris2x@gmail.com. I understand some of you have had trouble with the Amateur Traveler email address. Sorry about that. I'm working on fixing it. I heard recently from Justin Barnes, patron of the show and former guest, who commented on the episode we did on Hungary and Romania. One important note on pronunciation in Hungary: palinka is schnapps and pelinka is diaper. So make sure you emphasize the pa, like papa, when you ask for a drink. Also, if you do fly into Budapest during the summer and you can arrange to be there on August 20th, the celebrations they have in the city are incredible, from food and drink to music to an air show to the largest fireworks show in Europe. And I had to look that up, and that's the celebration of the founding of Hungary more than 1,000 years ago. And then I also heard from John about the episode that we did on Northeast Florida. John said, I quite enjoyed the podcast, and Angie's enthusiasm and passion for her home region was most evident. I do have 2 comments. Was most surprised that golf was never raised as an attraction. I've been on separate golf trips to both Amelia Island and Ponte Verde, home of TPC Sawgrass, and they are both world-class golf destinations. Also was taken back by Angie's and many from the Jacksonville area belief that the only rivers in the world that run north are St. John's and the Nile. Ouch from someone so well-traveled. Just one example from Canada is the Mackenzie River, which runs north into the Arctic Ocean. Not only is it one of the longest river systems in the world, but only the Mississippi has a larger drainage basin in North America. Thanks so much, John. In terms of golf, the last time I've golfed was in junior high, so it's been a while. So yeah, I probably never bring up golf. And you're right, Sawgrass is even one that I've heard of, so we did miss that out. I'm just back from a press trip to Door County in Wisconsin, which we'll hear about in a little bit on the show. If you hold up your hand to do that Shape of Wisconsin thing, your pinky is that 70-mile long Door County Peninsula. And had a great time there. You'll hear more about that. But with that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com. I'll try and get that fixed. Or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And thanks so much for listening.